Today, we're going to talk about why you should consume 3 to 4 eggs every single day. Now, I will say that eggs are an extraordinary topic, and believe me, I'm not an extremist with eggs, but I do consume eggs every single day. So before I dive in the topic, if you have even the slightest hesitancy about eggs because of cholesterol, you can take that idea and just get it out of your head, because eggs in no way, shape, or form have ever created a cholesterol problem. So that was a lot of propaganda. I'm going to put some new research down below in the description if you have any hesitancy whatsoever. But what I really want to dive into right off the bat is, why is an egg so special? Why is it so different than other types of protein like meats or fish? First of all, when you're eating animal protein in general, you're eating the muscle part. The muscle is responsible for contraction and relaxation and movement. But the egg doesn't do that, okay? It's something that's going to turn into a chicken. So let me just explain the difference as far as protein. Eggs have the highest biological value as far as protein. What the heck does that mean? It means that it absorbs the most protein in your tissues. Absorption. Egg is at the top of the list. The second point is, when we're talking about protein, why do we need protein? Generally, we need it to build muscle like tendons, ligaments, joints, etc. But we also need it for repair, because our bodies are constantly repairing our protein structures. Does it have any other purposes? Yes, it does. It helps you build hormones. It helps build enzymes to allow biochemistry to occur. But protein can also be used as a fuel source. But now let's just compare and contrast regular meat and egg protein for that. When you consume animal meat or fish, I'm talking about the muscle part. You could only use between 10 and 20% of that for fuel. Okay? Now, if you actually have a fatty piece of meat, well, you can use that fat for fuel, but I'm talking about just the protein itself. At the max, you can only use 20% of that as fuel. Okay, now what about egg? Well, the egg has the egg yolk, and that's a lot of fat. That can be used as fuel. So in other words, if we take a look at the entire egg, 65% of that egg can be used as fuel. And that also relates to people that are eating more lean meat. They're not going to be able to use as much of that for fuel. You know, there's experiments where people lived on rabbit meat, which is extremely lean, and they got really sick, and some of them even died because of the problem with the fuel. You can't live 100% on protein. So, the egg has some serious advantages over other types of proteins. I mean, you could literally live on eggs for the rest of your life and be pretty healthy. But that is not all. This egg has some additional things that meat doesn't have. It has a lot more protection. Okay, what do I mean by protection? Well, in this egg, you have all sorts of antimicrobial proteins. This is in the white part. What do I mean by antimicrobial? I mean things that can actually kill off bacteria. The egg white also has some things in there that can lock up iron, but also it can lock up vitamin B7, which is biotin. Now, I don't know if you ever heard that if you consume the raw egg white, there's something in there that can actually deplete you of biotin. I don't know if you've ever heard that before, but weightlifters sometimes would consume a whole bunch of raw eggs in a shake and drink that. And some of them were getting a biotin deficiency. But of course, if you heat up the egg white and you cook it, that thing goes away. So you don't have to worry about eggs depleting biotin. But the point is that the reason why that compound is in eggs in the first place is that certain pathogens depend on biotin. And if you can lock that up, you can eliminate the bad bacteria. Again, another defensive, protective purpose of the egg. Also, eggs have all of the essential amino acids, including leucine, which is the key amino acid that helps build muscle. Eggs also are the second highest source of choline, which is a B vitamin. Choline is really good to prevent a fatty liver. It's also something that makes up your bile to help you digest fats. And it's also really beneficial for those people that have a genetic problem that can help repair DNA damage. Now I'm going to give you a new word that you may have not heard about. It's called methylation, which is basically something in your body that can help DNA repair, detoxification, and also something to help make neurotransmitters. And the only reason I'm bringing this up is that a lot of people have a genetic issue with this. And so they can have problems if they don't get enough choline, if they don't get enough natural B12, which is in the egg, and they don't get enough folate, which is also in the egg. So in other words, a lot of people that have a genetic problem with this are going to get enough choline, and they're going to benefit from that. In fact, with my genetics, I found that I have a problem absorbing choline. And this is why eggs are really good for me. Another thing, that eggs have very powerful antioxidants called lutein and zeaxanthin are concentrated in the retina of your eye to act as a natural protection against ultraviolet light as well as blue light that can destroy certain parts of the eye. So for example, if we take this eyeball right here and we open it up right here in the back part of that eye. Okay, I don't know if you can see this. In the back part of the eye, you have the retina, and that is an extension of the brain that has these cells that pick up information and push it back into the brain. We need a super high concentration of lutein and zeaxanthin to protect those cells and also to be able to see in dim light. So these are very, very important. And eggs will give you these things. But it's not just good for the retina, it's also good for the other parts of the brain as well to help with concentration, memory, learning, etc. All right, what else does an egg have? Well, it has these interesting things called phospholipids. Again, I don't want to give you a bunch of big words. This is something that helps the membranes of your brain and other tissues to allow you to have really good cognitive function. Also, there's something in your eggs that actually mimic an ACE inhibitor, which lower blood pressure because of this thing right here. Egg also has vitamin K2 to transport calcium and keep it out of the soft tissues, the joints, the kidney, and the arteries, and push that calcium into the teeth and the bone. Okay, that's K2. It also has the active form of vitamin A called retinol, not just for the eye, but for your skin, the internal skin, through the sinuses, throughout the lung, throughout the digestive tract. Vitamin A is also important for your immune system, and the egg also has vitamin D. Now, before you decide that eggs are an excellent idea to start consuming a lot of them, we should probably talk about the type of eggs briefly. Okay? You have conventional eggs, which, by the way, 65% of all eggs that people consume are caged. Okay, what does that mean, caged? That means that that chicken their entire life is confined to a very small space of 8 inches by 8 inches. That's going to raise cortisol. Okay, you don't want to support that. I would not consume just caged eggs. Cage-free gives them a little more space, like 2 square feet. Okay, that's a little bit better. They might have access outside the barn, they might not, but they're in a very large facility with other chickens. It's still not that great, but pasture-raised is much better. At least they get 10 feet by 10 feet outdoors. Okay, this is what I would consume. Or even when you're at the farmer's market, find a farmer to get eggs from. It's going to be better. Of course, if you can have your own chickens like I do, that would be the ultimate. You need to know also the conventional eggs are loaded with fake colorings. I mean, when you think about it, the color of that egg is reflecting how much of these carotenoids you have, but it's all fake. Now, what about organic? Organic eggs do not tell you if they're in a cage or not. They just mean that the feed that they give them are like grains without pesticides and insecticides, herbicides and fungicides. So, of course, that's better. If you can do organic pasture, that would be great. And then that means it doesn't have the GMO grain foods, okay? It's not sprayed with glyphosate, but there are some loopholes there, especially if they're using wheat to feed them because they can spray it with glyphosate, and it could still be considered non-GMO. And don't be impressed when they say vegetarian feed, because it's like, oh wow, vegetarian feed versus what? I mean, I feed my chickens a lot of different foods. They love cheese. They will eat so many different things. And if I put grains versus some protein, they will go right after that protein source. I'm talking about meat. And so chickens were evolved to consume bugs and things like that, not necessarily just a lot of grains and not GMO corn and soy. So in other words, conventional chickens that are fed a lot of corn and soy, which is genetically modified, you're just really spiking the omega-6 fatty acids in that egg, and that is more inflammatory. There are eggs that you can get that are to increase the omega-3 fatty acids. I'm doing an experiment with my chickens right now. I'm feeding them a type of grain that's much higher in omega-3 than omega-6. Stay tuned for the results on that. All right. Now let's give you some tips on what you should combine your eggs with. Here's a couple things to think about. When you're consuming eggs, if you pair it with an arugula salad, you are going to increase the absorption of the phytonutrients in arugula by 9 times because of the egg yolk. It's fat, and a lot of the phytonutrients in all these greens in the salads are fat soluble. So that's a really good combination to optimize your health. I consume a lot of onions definitely with my eggs. I will saute them. You enhance your detoxification pathways. When you add black pepper to your eggs, which I always do, in sea salt, you increase the absorption of the carotenoids. Don't overcook them. I mean, sometimes this is hard when you're out at a restaurant and you're having breakfast or something, they can overcook it. I like to cook my eggs over easy with the yolk runny, or if I'm doing scrambled eggs, just cook it so it's just done, but not overly done. It's a minor point, but you'll just get more nutrients if you don't overdo it. Adding a tomato with your eggs is a good thing in season. I do that all summer long when I have these delicious tomatoes. Oh my gosh, every single day I do that. Tomatoes have a lot of great things, but at the top of the list is something called lycopene. This is probably one of the most potent antioxidants or carotenoids that you can consume that is really good for the inside of your artery, for your prostate. It's good for your eyes. It's good for your brain. But I just want to make this point. If this is too expensive, because sometimes they are, and you can just afford at this point conventional eggs, do it. Because there's enough nutrition in that conventional egg. That is way better than these conventional sources of protein that you would see that a lot of times are combining different sugars and starches, because they're not just protein, they add a bunch of stuff in there. So even conventional eggs are going to benefit your health. Another thing I add is the avocado. The fats in avocado are super, super healthy. And because you're consuming the whole avocado, you're getting the fresh raw oils or fatty acids, which are super healthy. Unfortunately, most avocado oil is refined. It's cooked, it's oxidized unless you get cold rest. And even then, the regulations on avocado oil are very, very loose right now. So you really have to verify where you get the avocado oil. And so when you cook that egg, I recommend using olive oil or butter. Now, you have to just be careful anytime you heat any oil. But because olive oil is just also loaded with so many protective phytonutrients and you don't overcook it, I think you're going to be fine with that. Now, I hope I've convinced you to consume at least one of your meal with eggs. But the question now is, what type of protein should you use on the other meal or meals? Well, for that information, you should watch this video right here.